Welcome back to the M3 podcast. This week we got Dalton and Logan on from the MMG squad. We got Joel Goldberg on with us. Thank you for being here.
It's good to be here in definitely one of the coolest settings that you could ever have for a podcast. And I'm checking out what jerseys you have in here.
I'm going to say I didn't have any part of this. It's going to be these two guys. So
good marketing guys, right?
Yeah,
we had a little bit of variety, a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
there is a little bit of everything. I mean, my eyes sort of go towards the Marshall Faulk jersey just because he's the best football player I've ever covered. I've been out of the football game for a long time, but he was he was as good as it got.
Yeah. So the crazy thing was yesterday I was talking with Logan about you coming on today, and he sent over your book to me yesterday. Last night I was going to start it, and I started thinking about it. And lately we've had quite a few people on the podcast I just don't really know a whole lot about. And I think that almost makes for a more intriguing podcast.
Yeah.
And you're involved in a lot of things. So thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come over. And I know you have a podcast and you're announcing and writing books and business and everything else.
It's pretty nostalgic for me. I've been watching you for years on TV. So
now I remember how old I am, right? First time I ever had a player in the big league say, I used to watch you as a kid. I'm like, oh, man. Now I just expect it. Either they'd watched or they didn't watch, but I know that they're old enough to their whole childhood. I mean, think about this, though. Like, this is my 18th season here. So anyone that is in their, basically 30s and younger was watching me as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, it means I'm old, but it also means that I've been lucky enough to do this for a long time, which is pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool. So where do you want to start the story of you? That's where I kind of always leave that to the person that's coming on. What are we talking about today? Where do you want to start, and kind of discuss that?
Well, a good marketing guy would tell me that, you should tie the book into this, right? I'm in promotion mode. But the reason why I bring that up, and I'll mock myself for working it in there, is that, I think most of us grow up with some kind of dreams, right? And if you're a sports fan, you had dreams of, hitting the walk-off home run or all that stuff. So I figured out pretty quickly that wasn't going to happen. I was a mediocre athlete at best. But what I knew very early on was that I loved talking about sports. And I wrote in the book, Small Ball, Big Dreams, that my parents were getting phone calls home from my first grade teacher complaining that I was disrupting class, giving updates on the previous night's baseball game. At that point, growing up outside of Philadelphia, we moved to Chicago when I was 13. Never thought that in 1980, I'm 8 years old, never thought that my childhood team, the Phillies, beating the Royals in the World Series would be beating a team full of guys that ultimately would be my friends and sometimes my colleagues. So that's pretty crazy because for me, there's no place that I would consider home like Kansas City. I've lived here now longer than anywhere in my life. But I had the bug to wanting to be the one to tell people about what happened, no matter what it was, since I was a kid. So to have lived that dream for 30 years is beyond what my dreams were. I just wanted to do it. And I think that, to me, when you talk about where the story starts, the story started with that dream, and it's still going in ways that I could have never imagined. So I always like to say dreams are, right, they're a little blurry. They don't always make sense. Well, if you had told me at 8, 10, 15, 18, or even 22 years old as I got out of school looking for a TV job, wanting to be on the news somewhere, I just want to be on somebody's local news, and I'll do it anywhere. And I did for little over $1,000 a month was my salary back then in 1994 in a small market in northern Wisconsin. I could have never envisioned that I would be having my own podcast, in part because podcasts didn't exist. I could not have envisioned I'd be hosting pre and post game shows. There really weren't many of them. There was national stuff, not local or regional. I could not have envisioned writing 2 books or being a motivational speaker. So that's all come over time with evolution. And so to me, I think the message is that you never really stop dreaming. And I really like to say that in a way that is not woo woo kumbaya, like, don't give up on your dreams. We've heard that forever. I think more so it's just don't give up on paying attention to what is available or what could happen, because you go down different paths that you never expected, and you don't go down those paths unless you're open-minded and you're paying attention and you're willing to experience some different things.
And I think we speak on a bit. I think from a business side and a sports world, I think that they're very similar in an aspect where people always see the holy grail. They see the championships. They see that side of it. They don't focus on what practice looks like. They don't focus on what the weight room looks like. They don't focus on really what makes it a reality. And we live in a society that I think compresses a lot of dreams.
Totally.
And people are told to give up on their dreams really quickly. That it's, hey, you're not the guy for it. And I always look back at, once again, these guys are way more sports fanatics than I am. But it's like, Tom Brady wasn't a superstar in high school or college, was he? Like,
no.
But then to come out and be the person
6
that he
round
was,
draft pick.
yeah. But it's like I look at the same thing in business. Like when I was getting into business, you'd probably take 10 guys to go bet on. I don't think I probably would have had real high bets.
Same for me.
But that dream to me though was so like, I say dream and vision are I kind of correlate them together. That I felt that vision and that dream was so clear that I'm like, I know that I can get there, but you have to focus on what you do every day, the practice that happens. And I think you run into a lot of hard spots. So when you had that dream of where you're at now and you're working the news for $1,000 a month, what did that look like? Like how, I think that's a lot of times where people end up just becoming stagnant for the rest of their life. What was the push out of that to keep the movement going?
It was probably $1,100 a month before taxes. I just remember that there was an apartment for $300 a month, and I couldn't afford it, and so I moved in with a roommate to another place, and we each had $170 a piece, so 2 bedrooms and $340 is our TV station director, and he looked like Garth from Wayne's World, and that's no exaggeration. So I've actually thought about this question, and I don't, I wish I could go back and tell you what the vision looked like, and nowadays that might be easier because, younger generations journaling more, and there's just a record of everything, right? There's no record. The record I have is somewhere in a box in the basement or in the garage. There's a binder of all the TV stations I visited, knocking on doors, trying to get in. What I know is that I knew I wanted to talk about sports. My sports heroes in broadcast were the local sports anchors on the news. There was a guy in Chicago who was legendary for years there, named Mark Jean Greco, was the sports director on the NBC, later the ABC. There was a guy in Philadelphia that I watched growing up named Don Tollefson. I wanted to be him. I remember being interviewed by him. I was probably in my, 27, 28 years old, St. Louis Rams at Philadelphia, and I'm on his pregame show, like, wow, this is... and so, and then the other one was Bob Costas on a national level. And now here we are with Costas having written the testimonial that's on the top of the back of my new book. And I write about him a little bit in the book. And then I just got an email from him congratulating me on the book. And it's like, that's like, how did that happen? Right. I mean, that's if I were to have gone back and told you that would happen, that was never part of the vision. The vision was, can I get to a point where I'm the local sports anchor, preferably in Chicago or Philadelphia, the 2 towns that I grew up in. And I don't know if I knew what it all looked like. I love the mention of the weight room, and the weight room can be a metaphor for anything, right? Or take the words that are in both of my book titles, small ball. The small ball is a metaphor for the little things. It's not just the bunts in baseball, the sacrifices. What goes into the end result, right? You see the final show. You see the final or hear the final podcast, but does anyone think about the editor? Does anyone think about the promotion? Does anyone think about all the other stuff? That's the small ball, right? And so there's so much more to that, and I don't think we think about any of those things as part of our vision.
So early days in my vision in business, I wasn't super hyper focused on the small things.
Mhm.
I read a lot, and watching documentaries and reading on Walt Disney. Walt Disney was obsessed with the small things.
Yeah.
Obsessed with it. And you talk about how far a trash can is from one another. The concrete that's under your feet changes between certain areas, and like these were the things that he focused on. And I always focused on the small things. I always understood the small things. I have a pretty high level of OCD when it comes to a lot.
See, it's helpful sometimes.
It is, but it's my thought process is like when somebody walks through our walls, like what is the waters that they get? Like what
I was just thinking about it right now. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Logan's shirt and I'm looking at the labeling on this. Like the attention to detail here, every single bit of it. That's why you guys are good at what you do. That's why I'm good at some of those things, but not that.
But I'm not gonna say we're always good at those things. So it's progressed.
Yeah, it's been a process, right? Like in I think your first book you referenced Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game, and that's what it is, right? Like too many people get in business or go into anything playing a finite game with the mindset that they're trying to get something out of this, or this is what has to happen. And it's like, if you just play the infinite long game and try to build good relationships with people in business and then focus on doing the right thing every day, but that's how you get success.
And I think what's really hard on, we talk about the small things, we talk about playing the long game, is if I had somebody looking at our financials, they probably wouldn't tell me this was the best way to spend money. When I look at our financials, they'd probably tell me the little black tag on the bottom of every shirt with our logo on, that little extra detail is worth the money. They probably wouldn't tell us that everyone in the company having plastic and metal business cards is the right spend of money. But I look at that as the standard of how you do one thing is how you do everything. And when people come into either one of our office locations, and it's the same thing that you see it in athletes, and I think it correlates over when they do the small things, and those are the guys that play in the leagues, the highest level.
Here's what I'll agree with all that. There is, I'm not trying to undersell myself, but you don't stay in my business, TV, forget about the speaking and all the other stuff. You don't stay in my business for 30 years without doing those things well.
No.
I'm not that good. I'm not saying I'm bad.
I'd say you're pretty decent. You've been in it for a while.
I think that you have to be decent if you're in it for a while. But if you're not a rock star, it's all relative, right? Some people might think I'm that. My family would tell you I'm not. But I think they'll keep me humble. But I'm just an everyday guy. And yes, there are things that I can do, I hope in front of a camera that I couldn't do in the past. When the Royals clinched this year, the final Friday night of the year, they clinched after losing and had to wait for Minnesota to lose, or it would have carried to the next day. And we basically filled live on the air for an hour and a half. I could have done 5 hours if I needed to. The thought of that 30 years ago, I would have gone and hid in the corner and then just hope that they'd find somebody else. I couldn't have done that. So you certainly learn and you get better over time. And I think that if you're somewhere long enough, you're there because you're good, and you're there, I think, more than anything because you figured out those little things, and you have to. So if you are a generational talent like a Bob Costas or like a Bobby Witt Jr. or like a Marshall Falk or whoever it is, then you don't have to do those things. But guess what? You probably do. Or you probably do them anyway, right? I mean, that's the differentiator with the Kobe Bryants and the Michael Jordans, is that their talent alone was better than anybody else's, but their work ethic and all the little things were also better than anybody else's.
Yeah.
Those are the outliers. For the rest of us, we have to get those things right. And so I'm of the belief that I've been in this business, not so much because I'm good at what I do, and again, if you're bad at it, you're not going to survive, but how do you treat people? How do you show up? Are you where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, doing what you say you're going to do, and continuously being reliable. And that's the stuff that follows you in terms of reputation. So when people say, oh, Joel Goldberg's a great guy, or Joel Goldberg's, whatever they say about me, at least when it's complimentary, it's something that didn't happen overnight, right? That's something that people see through fake. They know it's not real. And when you've been somewhere for 17 or 18 years, you got pretty good opportunity to show people who you are. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, that is what you are. And so I'm of the belief that's why I've been able to stay where I'm at.
And I think that speaks very highly to, I think in today's world, personal branding is huge. Mm-hmm. And I think personal branding, I'm not even talking social, I'm not talking online, any of that. I feel like your individual self, you have a personal brand that when you go places, if we take 100 people have met you, we take 100 people have met Dalton. I know a ton of people that know Dalton and Logan, and I get a lot of the same feedback a lot of times. It's the same compliments kind of come over. It's their personal brand of who they are. Yeah. That it's Dalton and I in college, like if you want to find somebody that's going to outwork Dalton, I'll put him up against anybody. Like you want to talk about somebody like addictive personality like myself, I'll put Logan up against the best of them. But it's like I know how to hone those things in, but it's like those are personal brand characteristics that people carry. And it's the same thing with what we've done. Like we get from people all the time, like you guys are the most consistent people we've seen. That we did the first 40 podcasts we did. Everyone should save their time. Don't listen to them. Like, but it's like the progression of getting better.
I remember how that went.
And we're 160 in now, but we have not missed a Monday.
You can't.
In 160 weeks.
You can't.
It's a non-negotiable. We've done taco reviews now that I will get recognized all over the place for taco reviews. Wow. And I'm not going to say, everyone's like, oh, that was a good idea. I'm like, it wasn't my idea. I saw Dave Portnoy's, everyone watching do pizza reviews. I'm like, I know there's people out there that don't want to see us talking about marketing every day. I wouldn't want to follow that. So we started putting stuff out there people want to see. And it was just start creating that brand. And people were like, oh, yeah, you guys are consistent. You guys work hard. You guys do what you say you're going to do. Those are the marketing aside from it. If we're making coffee, or if we were selling books over here, whatever it was, like I would still want the same compliments that come through.
And there's a lesson here too. I mean, I'm going to guess that your audience is, for the most part, not all, going to be a little younger than me. Like, but whoever it is, whether it is someone that's my generation, Gen X, or whether it's a millennial or Gen Z, like at some point, the next thing is going to come behind you. And you've got to be able to understand what that next thing is and consistently do it, right? So you got to be in touch. You got to stay connected with people. That's what I'm constantly trying to work on, because I'm 52 years old. I'm covering a bunch of 20-something-year-old athletes. So if I don't understand how their world is working and how to live in that world and that ecosystem, then I'm going to be obsolete. So I'm constantly trying to figure all of that out as well. And the personal brand will always, I totally agree with you. The personal brand will always matter, but people need to be able to see it. And so you need to know how to be able to connect that with people and how to get that out there for yourself. I tell young aspiring broadcasters or anyone in any industry that take any open door that is given to you. Like, don't ever apologize if someone's willing to open a door, make a connection for you. I see a lot of people saying, well, I want to do it myself. No. Take any open door that is given to you, but then it's up to you to stay in that door. And a lot of that has to do with your personal brand and who you are and how you go about things. And then, how you deliver that and the way you reach people, that'll change over time, right? I don't know what the best way to reach people right now is. You guys know better than me. Is it Instagram? Is it feels like Snapchat's maybe dying a little bit?
So it's really
YouTube.
What the crazy thing, it depends on what it is. That they all have their respective verticals on how they run and operate, who the audience is. Sports world, I mean, X does really well. There's a lot of people that are on X that moves the sports needle. But if I'm watching Royals game or I'm watching a Chiefs game or something, I want something, I can refresh X and it's going to pop up with 20 people that just gave me a live update of what happened. Yep. You go to Facebook, you're going to scroll and it's going to tell you about something that Channel 4 posted from yesterday, or that so-and-so just got engaged 4 days ago. But it's like you're seeing nothing about the game. So the algorithms just read so different. Yeah. And that's where it is when we talk about our podcast and who our audience is, a lot of my friend group is 50 plus years of age. Like everyone, I'm an old soul. I like smoke cigars, drink bourbon. I have an old group, and it's like they're all entrepreneurs. A lot of them have exited their companies, built from the ground up, but I feel like I can talk on a very high educated level with them. So a lot of our audience into the podcast space has ended up being this older generational business owner.
And you got to reach them.
But they don't understand. So the podcast alone helps reach them, but they don't understand what the social media vertical looks like. And it's even changed since I'm 30 and we're hiring people that are 20, 21 years old. And they're coming in, they're like, we should be doing this, this, and this. I'm like, 100%. Like, let's try it.
Got to listen to them.
But we have all these different minds in the business, but it's everyone has a voice to say, I know I'm not right every time. Like what I'm looking at online to the next, personally, I'm somebody that hates social media.
Yeah. And
to have a company that's built on it is crazy.
Yeah.
I would be cool with living out in a cabin on thousands of acres and not see a building in sight.
Live in this damn van.
Yeah.
with nothing attached to it, right?
Yeah. But in today's world, we look at
it's a currency.
How do you get in front of people? Attention span is more valuable than money. So if we're going to put that attention out there, we're going to try to capture it. You have to put content out that somebody's willingly going to give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at, what does that look like on Facebook? What does that look like on Instagram? What does that look like on TikTok? What does that look like on YouTube? What does that look like on X, Snapchat, wherever it might be? One of the most valuable things that we do every day is I do a story when I drive in every day. And it's like less than a minute. And it's whatever's flowing through my head. There's a rough spot on I-35 that my truck's like, blah, 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 blah. And right by Pleasant Valley, right after I cross that, whatever I'm thinking about, I hit it.
Yeah.
And I post it, and it's raw,
just raw,
authentic, whatever I'm thinking about. And it will start 5 to 10 conversations every day.
And that's what everyone wants, is the authentic stuff, because now it's become so scripted and everything's staged.
Because and that's what I'm trying to shift from a little bit, because I was raised in a different way. I could do live TV. I'm not a script guy. I haven't been a script guy for most of my career. Sometimes that might show, but I don't like you're going to get whatever's going through my head. It's not that I'm not prepared. I'm certainly going to have bullet points and direction and places I want to go, but I don't like a script. However, what I've been learning in the last few years is that when I need to do something for social media, it's so much easier to jump in front of my camera in my basement, in my little studio, and it just looks so staged, you know? But I was raised in a way where everything needed to be perfect. And now I'm understanding people don't want perfect. And so just go and do it.
So I started figuring out when I'm like the OCD guy that like everything has to be absolutely perfect when we podcast.
I'm very much like that too.
I used to, like, when we podcast in the garage, I was like, whole table had to be cleaned off every time before we podcast and sure the counter behind there's not a single thing. And then you start watching, like, I'm watching the Theo Vaughn, Shane Gillis podcast. I pull it up and I'm like, these dudes are sitting there just an absolute mess. Yeah. And guys are like walking in, adjusting their mics, moving things around. And I'm like, did they edit this?
Yeah.
And I'm like sitting there, I'm like looking at the view count. I'm like, 8 million views. I was like, people care about what the context is that they're listening to.
Yeah.
Or
we used to sit and suffer, not go to the bathroom because we thought we couldn't take a break during the podcast.
Like,
can't even move.
Yeah. But then the last like 10, 15 minutes of the podcast, we get really bad because all I'm sitting there is like, don't pee your pants. Don't pee your pants.
I get it. That just gives me visions of the World Series parade where I was doing 3 hours worth of live coverage and there was not a bathroom that you could get to within sight, even during a commercial break. That was, and I had no voice, so I needed to hydrate, but I couldn't hydrate because I was going to have to go to the bathroom. So it was just 3 hours of lozenges whenever I wasn't on camera.
Yeah.
So what did your movement into Kansas City look like?
It was interesting because I highly, highly lobbied to get this job. And that was confusing to a lot of people coming from St. Louis. And I get it. Like, well, right now the Royals are definitely better than the Cardinals. But first off, for me, I didn't grow up in St. Louis, which I think was important for me to let everybody there and here know. Because there, maybe it explained why I was leaving their beloved team. And here it was like, no, I'm not a St. Louis. You know, that matters to people here. I don't really care. But But the job that I have here, which I've now had for 17 seasons, pregame, postgame show host, in-game reporter, there were 3 of us, myself included at the time, I think it's 2 now, but 3 of us that shared those duties. So I was never the regular host. I might fill in and host. I might go on the road with the Cardinals for a week, come home and say, all right, take a few days off. Somebody else will do these games. So it was never really mine. And the guy that was the main pre and post game show host was never going to leave. He did about 10 years after I left for a news job in Arizona or something like that. So I knew that there was a next step for me. I didn't know where it was going to be. I then found out that my network was taking over the Royals broadcast in 2008. So I asked my boss to put my hat in the ring, and he wasn't really interested. I mean, he wanted to go on a big national search and all that. I don't recommend doing this, but I might have gone over his head and went straight to the top and said, I'm interested. Can we talk about it? And I don't recommend, going over a superior to do that unless it's something where it's so important to you that you're willing to burn the bridge to get to where you need to go.
Yeah.
I'm not. I am a firm believer. Talk about the little things of never burning a bridge. And so I went out to lunch with the general manager of the network or the region and my boss, who had originally said no. And of course, by the time we left that lunch and the GM said we should bring Joel, and we trust him, we know him. Why would we start with someone someone else that we don't know? And of course the boss said, oh yeah, he'd be great. He moved on to something bigger, and I knocked on that door a couple of times for some side work, and never got a sniff. So that was the bridge that I burned.
Mm-hmm.
I have no regrets on it. I haven't told that story a lot, but I have no regrets on it because look at where I'm at. And when I came to Kansas City in 2008, I did not know that it would be the final destination. I hoped it could be, but I didn't know. I mean, and I don't know when that dawned on me, but there came a certain point, it was probably a few years in, 3-4 years in, where I'm like, this is the spot. Or maybe I said it in a way of, hey, I don't find myself looking for the next thing. I mean, I think that the TV journey is very much like, say, the entrepreneurial journey, where you're constantly looking at what's next, and not to say that you're not looking at improving, but for the first time in my life, after I got here, it was, I haven't put together a resume tape or a resume in years. And so I realized I was where I was at. The other piece to this is that my wife grew up in Kansas City. She moved away when she was 11. So we're now talking 33 years later. No, 23 years later. So, I mean, like a lifetime later. Her sister, they'd moved to Chicago. Her sister moved back here and married a guy from here. And so then when my niece was born, and she's like your guy's age, but when my niece was born, that's the first time I ever came to Kansas City. We drove in from St. Louis, to meet her after she was born. And then same thing for my nephew. And then we'd come in for birthdays and for holidays. And then our kids were born. And so we were back and forth on I-70 all the time. So by the time we moved here, it was a familiar place that was not familiar like it is now, but there was a comfort level to it. And I remember I moved here in the end of March 2008. And my wife was a teacher at that point, so she was finishing up a school year in St. Louis. My 5-year-old, now 22-year-old, was finishing up preschool, so they stayed back there, and I'd lived with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law and niece and nephew for about couple months, and then we bought a house, and the rest is history.
So in 2008, when you're in the world that you're in, broadcasting, did you guys feel it in 2008 with overall everything that was happening economy wise as much, or was it still pretty normal?
Couple things. I mean, from a work standpoint, I didn't feel anything. Like I was I would feel it more now with my business and the way it would change the way speakers are hired or not being hired, or, I would feel it in a way like I did the pandemic. So in some ways I was oblivious to it, but I was also oblivious to it because we put our house on the market in St. Louis, sold it like maybe the first day. It was a great house, first day or two, and quickly. And I think if it had been a few months later, we may never have sold it. Like, we just got lucky with the timing. So I could have very easily felt that, and I don't know what we were not at a stage in life where we would have been able to afford to do both.
Yeah.
So we actually got out from it so quickly that the network gave us corporate housing back in St. Louis. Well, they were going to give us corporate housing one way or another for 6 weeks or something like that. And then coming and staying in with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, essentially we lived rent-free for a month and a half or whatever it was. Had the timing been just a little bit off, I don't even know if we could have done this.
Yeah. The only reason I asked, been like 14, but my dad owned mortgage companies. So 08 got bleak pretty fast.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that I knew some industries, it was like just life went on as normal kind of. And there's some things that was just like whole thing was blown up overnight.
I mean, the TV world and the baseball world, everything was normal.
Yeah.
Pandemic, not so much.
Yeah.
Right. That was a whole different story, but we got lucky. I don't know. Maybe it was meant to be. It was certainly the best decision I ever made, because I can count. I don't know how many games I've done since I've been here. I mean, there were some years, my early years, we were contracted to do 140 games. And so that meant 22 games. Royals weren't good then, so there was no national TV exposure for them. That means 22 games were just not seen. Like, nobody saw the games here. I mean, if it was a home game, you could have gone to them. You could maybe see some highlights somewhere because they'd pull it off of the Jumbotron. Usually, we did not televise Saturday and Sunday games because the thought was, why? We did not do Saturday and Sunday games in the second half of August and September, because why compete with college football and NFL when nobody was going to watch? Yeah. So that removed a bunch of them. And then they started adding some HD in. Then the complaints were, why can't we watch all the games? Why can't they all be in HDV and the HD? And then it just became the expectation, all 162 will be televised. And so however many games that is, and we would lose some of the national TV overtime when the Royals were good. That's going to happen again this year. So we lose a little bit of income there, but you get some time off, which is nice, and hard to come by. But when I look at it, I missed one game in 08 when my grandfather passed away. I missed a half a game for my son's high school graduation, half because we were in town. So I just, like in the 6th inning, I just picked up and, drove to the graduation ceremony. And then I missed 2 games for my daughter's graduation because we were out of town. So I had to leave the team. So that's 3.5 games. Any other games that I've missed was 7 days to go on a USO tour with George Brett and others, where I was broadcasting live on assignment. 3, going to Cooperstown for Buck O'Neill's Hall of Fame induction, broadcasting live on assignment. So I've done over 99% of every pregame, postgame, and in-game report. And that's the beauty of being in this market, because we have no NHL, we have no NBA. I don't have a peer or a colleague in this business that does that workload, because if you go to, say, Minnesota or Detroit, they've got a full staff to take care of baseball, NHL, NBA, or even if I go into St. Louis, my counterparts there, the reason why there were 3 or now I think 2 is because they got NHL and baseball. I've been lucky enough that I've been the only guy. And so talk about personal brand, or professional brand in this case. Whether people like me or don't like me, and it's a subjective business. most people are really gracious and kind, and some on social media, not as much. That's part of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
But whether they like me, don't like me, or whatever it is, you know who you're getting.
Yeah.
Every single night. I'm coming into your living room every single night. I wouldn't want to see this much of me, but I'm grateful that people do, you know? And that's been what has made this so incredible, is that for 18 seasons now, I've been able to do it every single day. And then that's led to all the other stuff. So it's been beyond my wildest dreams.
When you came in 2008, what did you see the long-term vision for your career looking like then? Because I do want to get into how you shifted into some of the speaking, wrote books and stuff. What was your vision back then coming in? What did you want your career to look like?
I think my vision, if I remember it correctly, Logan, was that I wanted to fit into the community and all those type of things, and hope that, I would be respected and liked, and that all happened in time. But I think the big part that was missing from the vision, or the part that I hoped would be the case, was, what do I do with the other 6 months? Because what I didn't mention was that when I left St. Louis, I left a salary job. So even if the Cardinals weren't playing, and even if the Blues weren't playing, I was still getting paid every day. And in the off season, I might just come in and do some busy work, or pretend like I was working. I don't know, like to try to justify the salary. I don't know. I was still young enough that it's like, I got a show. And I came here and I lost the benefits, and I became an independent contractor. But the allure was all the airtime, and I'm going to get paid a year's worth of salary in 6 months. And so I got this opportunity to go do other things. I think the vision was like, maybe I could hook on with, I don't know, like the Chiefs or KU, or, some K-State or something. And, what I didn't understand was that those spots, those places, they already have people. Like, hey, let's go get the Royals guy. No, we already have people that are focused on this, this, and this. And so those opportunities rarely came. And I found myself doing a lot of just whatever I could get my hands on. I was doing a little UMKC basketball for a bit. I was doing some Mavericks hockey for a bit. All stuff that was a lot of fun, but none of it was, certainly none of it was going to pay big money. Not that that's what it's all about, but it was also like, it was basically like get me off the couch time. Mm-hmm. None of it was recurring. None of it was regular. So there was no real, I enjoyed it, but there was no passion. There was no ownership to it. And I just never found that. So I think the vision was, hey, not only am I going to get all this airtime, and I'm going to get paid, a year's worth of salary in 6 months, but I got a chance to go out there and make more and do more and explore some things I've never done before. And none of that was happening. And so the vision was that there was going to be more opportunity. What I didn't realize, that the vision would come to fruition about 10 years later through completely different avenues.
So when you move forward and you get to the spot of, because Logan's told me a little bit that you do motivational speaking, why was that the pick?
So, and I'll say this too, like I really pushed back on this motivational speaker label when I started, because I just thought like that meant I was going to be like Chris Farley or something like that, right? down by the river in a van. And what I came to understand,
now you're just in a marketing office.
Now I'm in a marketing office down by close enough to the river.
Yeah,
in a van. We're close enough. But actually, I've come to understand that I am a motivational speaker, and I love it, and I've got a lot, I believe, to offer. I am very confident in that. But this all came to fruition when one off season, 2016, a buddy of mine, I was announcing a holiday high school basketball event in Columbia, Missouri, the Norm Stewart Classic, I think is what it was called, and it was, again, something to go do, not a lot of money, it was fun. And I go out with a buddy of mine that lived over there after, and he says, what are you up to besides this? I'm like, not much. I'm speaking to this golf course and lawn care management association next week in Olathe. And he says, do you do a lot of that? I said, not really. And he said, you should. He said, you should start a speaking business. And I thought he was crazy. Like I never lived a day of my life in business, or what I call the real world. because we work as hard as anybody else, but we're in a playland where I'm talking about sports every single day. It's not a normal job, and the best job. And I thought he was crazy, and he gave me some suggestions. His wife's a speaker, and I thought, well, maybe this could be something to do on the side. Maybe this could be a little bit of a side hustle. Maybe it's something that is a little bit more than what I was doing. And I just started meeting with people. And a buddy of mine said to me, good businessman in town, he says, you need to start networking. Now, he claims that I said to him, I don't deny it, I just don't remember it. There might have been some whiskeys involved too. But he claims I said to him, what is networking? Now, that's like the most preposterous thing ever. I network every day now. But I've been networking my whole life. We just didn't call it that. You know, you go into a baseball clubhouse, you go into a NHL locker room, it's not networking, but that's all you're doing. You're BSing with guys, you're building relationships and trust. And so I just started meeting with everyone, speakers, CEOs, entrepreneurs. And the lucky thing for me is because I had all these years under my belt with the Royals, I could get into a lot of doors of people not saying, who are you? And at least I could get their time. And that started building this whole, like, okay, most of these people are not going to hire me, but they're going to give me their time. They're going to give me their expertise. They're going to introduce me to more people. And so I started building a network. And then I started offering to do some speeches for free in front of bigger groups. And that's what started opening the doors of, oh, wait a minute, this guy's pretty good. Let's hire him. And then the other thing is I just understood that if I am going to be a motivational speaker that is speaking about baseball, that's a pretty limited audience. Like, what company or what association, what annual meeting is going to hire a guy to talk about the state of the Kansas City Royals? Like, sometimes maybe some holiday parties, in December here in town. Maybe sometimes this time of year, somebody might get a small group together and talk a little Royals, but, you probably can get a close to free version of that at a Rotary Club too. But what I understood, not too far removed from the Royals World Championship, is that small market, Cinderella, not the most talented, there have to be a lot of lessons in there. They talked over and over again about the culture they had built. Well, boy, that might translate. And so I started speaking about culture and leadership and teamwork, and that became the starting point. And then that started to evolve, and I came to understand, I think at a higher level, the art of storytelling and how to effectively storytell on stage in front of 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, whatever it is, and do it in a way of leveraging baseball as a storytelling mechanism without it ever being a baseball speech. And that then turned into books, podcast. Well, podcast came first. Podcast, speeches, books. The podcast was from day one meant to be a content creator. Maybe not in terms of social media. I mean, it has, but in terms of speaking content, in terms of book content, in terms of blogging content, in terms of, that podcast has given me access to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories and people, and introductions and networking and all that. And so it's all kind of come together. And when I look back at where it is now versus 8 years ago, I can't believe it. And then every day I'm like, why am I not here yet? That's that balance, right? Of just slow down, do the little things, get in the weight room, so to speak, play small ball, keep trusting it, make your changes when you need to. And that's what keeps me up at night. It doesn't keep me up at night. I sleep fine, but that's what I think about when I go to bed.
Yeah. And that's when you're talking about those kind of pillars, that talking on leadership, you're talking about culture. And I think there are a lot of buzzwords in business in today's time that everyone's got to build a good culture, but they don't know what culture means.
That's right.
And they don't have an effective story that, like you said, you can build the story and tell the story right next to it, to where it rings home a little bit more to the person that maybe isn't the visionary, that you have to outline it black and white from beginning to end of what culture looks like. Because there's I see it a lot more in an older generation of business right now, that the leadership forefront is trying to lead the same way they were 20 years ago. And they think culture now is putting a ping pong table in the lobby or
Totally.
putting some sort of game somewhere that they go buy a pinball machine and they're like, I got culture in my office. I got a pinball machine in the lobby. I'm like, that's not culture. And I'm like, but it's because they see, like, I mean, for a long time we had a ping pong table in the other office and people would come in. They're like, oh, you got good culture. I'm like, that can leave and it doesn't make a difference. Like, it's how you take care of people. What do people like being in your workplace? That's it. When I've looked at office space, every time it's commercial agents will take me right into some place that's white cubicles, looks like a sweatshop, and they're like, dude, this would be perfect for a marketing company. I'm like, no shot am I sitting in one of those, so I'm not going to make anybody that works with me sit in one of those.
No, think about that in terms of, and I think about that all the time when, there's some things that they may want us to do on the air, which is fine. I'll do, whatever they ask. But then it's like, all right, would you put yourself in this position? Would you sit here and do this? And so that's when you're in touch with it. You say ping pong table. I always say that just throwing a kegerator in the company's basement or kitchen does not give you culture. The culture is celebrated with the kegerator. The culture is celebrated with the ping pong table. That's how you celebrate those victories and that you enjoy it. That doesn't create the culture. Yeah. And that's where a lot of companies get it wrong.
And so we had last Friday was Employee Appreciation Day. Nobody in the office knew our leadership team put the whole thing together. We had masseuses come in. We had the garage doors open, music blaring. We're cooking food out front, ping pong tables.
Why didn't you invite me for that?
I know. But it was funny. We put a video on Instagram and everyone's like, it just looks like a blast there. I had probably 30, 40 people reach out to me. And even people I ran into over the weekend, they're like, next time invite me when you guys have a big party at the office. But those are that's what takes place. And it's people that enjoy working with one another. That I always formulate it as like, we have a team here, that you have a coaching staff, that we have an offense, we have a defense, I think a lot of companies, you have an offense and a defense that are playing each other.
Yep.
And it's they're butting heads all the time, and it's they're butting heads with leadership. And it's my thing with leadership is I'm like, we go nowhere without any players on the field.
Yep.
If there's no players on the field, we're dead in the water. And it's like, if there's no coaches, we're dead in the water. And it's my deal is I've gotten to where I joke that I don't really have a job. I'm like, because they're 10 times better than me at everything that they do. Same thing with the two leading our content side, the two leading our sales side, to where now it's like some days I come in and I'm like, if my schedule's not all the way booked out, like I'm working on writing a book right now. I'm working on all these other things, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, and then I'm like coming in their office. I'm like, what do you guys got going on? I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like,
hey, we're busy, man.
Yeah, they're like,
Get some food?
yeah, they're like, we're doing this, and this. I'm like, you got time to go lunch or something?
Let
like,
the workers work.
Yeah, but it's also working on keeping that energy that we get a lot of work, but it's once again, somebody should come to work and have the energy level that I can go into places, and I can pretty quickly within 30 seconds I can tell you if that company's moving or if they're not.
I could tell it with the companies that I work with that hire me to speak. And it's not as simple as every company that hires me has it, but more times than not, if they are paying attention to the details you talked about with their event and everything is going exactly as it is intended to, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be snafus, stuff happens. But when they have already thought about all those details, they already have the culture. I can tell it. When they want a nickel and dime over this little expense or this thing or, whatever, and then ultimately we'll make a decision whether we want to work with them or not, right? That's my choice still. But when you have to jump through some of those hoops, if they're not willing to make that full investment, they're generally, they don't quite have it. I know that's a very simple way of saying it. But to me, I guess what I'm trying to get at is the companies that hire me to speak about culture, or my big topic right now is trust. Winning trust is my main keynote right now. That when they're willing to invest in that, they're already pretty good at it. And they want to get better at it. I was just out to lunch today with the CEO of a company that had hired me, and I spoke to them about a month ago. 2 companies that are merged into one, and they're dealing with a lot of what you're talking about right now, and it can feel like offense and defense. They're figuring it out. They've got it figured out. Most don't. But I knew just in talking to their people. So like a lot of times what I'll do if I'm speaking at an event, if it's out of town, this one was in Wichita, they're based also out of here. And if I can get in time and they've got an event the night before or some kind of happy hour, I want to go, because you start to meet people. One, that enables you to get on stage, have some people that are rooting for you, a friendlier audience. And two, gives you a chance to really get a feel for what's going on. And when you sit down with people like that and they're not complaining about their company and they're raving about their company, they're doing something right. And they've got that culture.
And we go back to it, what we were talking about earlier, that doing the small things on like this, doing waters doesn't create culture, doing shirts doesn't create culture. And I think a lot of times people think that that's the investment that they need to make. Like maybe we get some cooler stuff. Like material items aren't going to create it. It's something that you have to generate from a leadership side. One of my faults to the early leadership side, when I created the leadership team, I divided them. So it's like I had an offensive group and a defensive group that the coaches didn't talk. Mm-hmm. To where I'd created the divide at a higher level that then divided all the way down, which was my fault. And I had to sit and look as like, how do I unify this group more, that as they collaborate more, then it starts collaborating more down line. And that kind of started, we've never had a problem with the culture. We've just had it divided at points. And I think bringing that all back in, but I also am like the first one. I have no problem that most people don't know the reasoning behind the bus, that the bus was something that I'm an energy, like you got to carry the energy kind of person, that we had a big account that we lost due to the fact that I have tattoos. For 9 months, I had this account. I wore long sleeves every single time. And I finally got to a point where I was like, we had acquired enough business that I'm like, I'm not going to be someone I'm not, just hold this one account. It was a big account. And so I go in there one day in a t-shirt and we have cancellation within 7 days. And so I saw the energy shift so fast because this company was up 25.9% year over year. They were putting up the biggest months that they've ever put up. And it was a guy that was so stuck in his ways that he does not allow tattoos or beards in his locations. And it was something that I made a choice, but I knew that it was affecting the energy in the office. Mm-hmm. And I saw it that Friday. So I bought this over the weekend. I had it brought in Sunday night, and I called the guy that was painting it to where everyone rolls in Monday and there's a full-size bus in the office that's getting painted, to where all of a sudden it was a distraction piece. I didn't want them all hyper-focused on this one account that, quite frankly, was 100% on me, why we lost it. We had done our job, what we were supposed to do. So I was like, and my brother's like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's a diversion over here. Let everyone look over here. Now, then they're all posting on Instagram. They're like, we came in the office this morning, there was a bus in here. And you could just see this energy shift. But most of the time, so that was the whole reason behind this.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And it cost, I don't know, I think I was all in like $8,000 to really divert the problem. It was worth every penny.
Yeah.
But if you let those people just take that energy and carry it down, you have to figure out as a leader how to revert that back in the right direction.
Yeah. And there's something to be said too about losing a client that, it hurts financially, but boy, it feels better.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do, especially early on, right? The people that find the sweet spot, I'm trying to get there myself. The people that find the sweet spot take energy from losing the wrong fit. The best entrepreneurs that I know will, if not fire clients, will say, I want to work with you if and only if it's a perfect fit. And if it's not, then we shouldn't. That's a hard thing to turn down business. I know that's not what you were trying to do, but in the end, you saw what came of it.
Which we've really focused on the last probably 12 to 18 months, really kind of finding our groove, because early days in business, you want everyone to be your client.
You have to.
And those days, it was like if somebody was putting dollars up, we were saying yes. And then as you progress, you start figuring out that not every dollar is a profitable dollar. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of dollars you can take that are negative dollars. So and there was a lot of clients that we took that we didn't enjoy the partnership with them. So as we've progressed, it's really became something that we have fallen into our groove that I'm very aggressive in business. I'm very, very forward on the way that I think and the way I operate, that it's a competitor spirit. Like we're winning, and it's like we want to work with winning companies. And there's people out there that don't like us in the marketing space. I've led full speed, and we don't look like normal marketing people. We look different. The blue collar world has never had somebody to help them. And we own the blue collar world. The automotive space has had these market agencies that come in that they don't understand the automotive space at all. We do. And so all these different verticals that we're taking, we own them really well.
Yeah.
And we don't need the other work that we're not going to own well. And we have financial sector, we have restaurants, you name it, we got it. But it's the business owner that comes in that we partner with is the person that I would go drink whiskey with, or I go drink beers with, or
I might even have some tattoos.
Yeah. And it's like, I have guys that come in that are in jeans and cowboy boots that I'm like, this guy has $400 million worth of equipment, but he goes into a normal marketing place, they're going to look down at him.
Yep.
And it's just because we dress different doesn't mean that somebody's any different on a level.
Totally. I mean, I feel like I've been lucky from that standpoint. I don't think you're ever going to see a tattoo on me, not because I'm an anti-tattoo. I'm just total chicken. So my wife and daughter both just got tattoos. I'm like, good for you. They're like, are you next? I'm like, no, I don't even like needles or anything. And so probably not. But I've been fortunate enough because my background in TV for 30 years has given me opportunities to be surrounded by people from the lowest levels. When I say lowest levels, I mean like my early TV years. And being in communities where I always had to try to find a way to fit in. So from a suburban kid from Chicago, and now I'm in a blue collar area, or I'm in some rural area, or I always love this example. When I worked in St. Louis, we did a lot of high school sports. High school sports are an incredible way to learn a community. And so in many ways, I know the St. Louis community better than Kansas City, geographically at least, because I've been at every high school in the surrounding St. Louis area. And so on any given day, I could go into a high school gym one day where the kids were living in $1 million homes down the street. And the next day I could be going through the metal detectors in the inner city, or sitting on the front porch with a mom in East St. Louis as her son's getting ready to go to the NBA, and see a drug deal going on down the street. And, those experiences have enabled me, I think in an authentic way, to just be able to blend in and be a chameleon in any setting, whether it be a Latin American setting with the baseball players, whether it be the inner city, whether it be out in the country, and I'm not a country boy, to with your stereotypical, I don't know if there's a stereotypical, but with the billionaires in the business world. And that to me, without losing my identity, has enabled me to connect with everybody. And ultimately that's what it's all about. Every bit of this is about connecting with people.
Yeah. And I'm a big network person. I'm in all these like private, big like CEO clubs and different things like that, they're not like a sale wall. Like I don't go to BNI things. I don't go to any of that stuff. Like you get there and everyone's like, how much business are you giving out today? Like, I'm like that. I want no part of that. And I like things where you just become friends with people, and friends work with friends,
and then build a relationship and see where it goes.
And I always look at how do I bring value to a room that I sit in.
Yep.
And
Totally.
I go into these rooms and I've sat there and I've given full marketing breakdowns for somebody's company that they're like, I have 4 marketing people in house, and I've never had a breakdown and a thought process of how to move my company forward like that.
Yeah.
And it's moved us into a consulting world. It's moved us into a lot of different verticals to help, but my thing is I just want to see people win.
Yeah.
I want to see people do well. And I can be a chameleon in any room, but it's like you said, not losing that identity. That I think there's a lot of people that start doing that, and I've watched it.
That gets back to your personal brand.
Yeah. They get into that trying to be a chameleon, then they don't really know who they are. Yeah. And my thing is, if I'm going to be who I am, and if I sit down with somebody and they don't like who I am, I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. I don't need everyone to like me, and we're going to run the way that we run. And I think it's a satisfying spot to get to.
Oh, totally. And it's not something I don't think, you're really ahead of the game. I don't think that's ever part of the vision. It's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think you really understand. I think that's a personal thing with, I say the man in the mirror. I have hard conversation with him every morning,
Yeah.
but it's, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, he wants to go back to bed.
Yeah.
And it's talking your way out of that. And it's
Yeah.
talking your way into doing what you need to do every day, but it's also being that person that you want to be. And I think that I like the idea of the speaking side, and I like the idea of kind of how you've positioned all of it together. It's pretty cool.
Like, I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that I would find something that I like as much as the TV and the baseball world. Like, I've had people say to me, well, if you had to pick one over the other, I'm like, well, I don't. So that's a way to take me off the hook. But I do pick one over the other. I will not skip a baseball game for a bigger speaking payday.
Yeah.
I won't. I lose business because of that, but I don't lose the baseball. And there's room for all of it. And so I have to say no to some things. But I truly love the speaking as much as I love the baseball, in some ways for different things, right? There's something cool about creating your own thing. There's something cool about being able to get on stage, or I wouldn't even say cool, just very uplifting and very meaningful to be able to make an impact on people's lives. We can do that on TV too. It's in a different way. But I think there's something really unique about being handed the keys to that car and saying, hey, go inspire my people, and knowing how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, getting the ability to change people's lives and make an impact. That sports definitely, as a whole, has an impact on people's lives. But being that person, if you can flip that switch for one person in a room,
it's incredible.
You win.
And it's usually more than one. You hope it's one, right? But it usually is more than one. And so that is so gratifying. And I you just meet the most interesting people too.
Yeah. Well,
so the speaking and podcasting led to the 2 books, and 1 book I feel like is quite a feat for most people. So what was the process like there, and then what made you decide to do a second one?
The process, I can write, and I knew I was told from day one when I started my speaking business that speakers write books. It's a business card. It's a marketing tool. It's a branding tool. All that. I just didn't know what I could possibly write about. Like, again, the Royals, writing Royals won the World Series how they wanted it. Is that really going to do it? And so I started the podcast instead. That eventually led to the book. I liked the small ball concept. I thought it was a way for me to work in some baseball, be a little bit cute with it. Some people had a different definition of small ball, so I get that every now and then, but it's fine. I mean, it's it usually says a lot about people, but I liked that it was different and unique. And so the first book was Small Ball, Big Results, was going to be really the how to, what small ball is, what are the little things you can do to give yourself a better chance of being successful and building trust and relationships and all those type of things. And when I finished that book, and it was a different process, the first book than the second, in part because most of that first book was written during the pandemic. I just had the time and the energy to do it. When I finished it, I had a business coach at the time that said, I've got the title for your next book. I remember saying, wait, we just finished this one. Can we slow down a minute? And he said, well, your next book should be Small Ball, Big Dreams. And I thought, well, I like that a lot, in part because I make a living interviewing people about their dreams. How many times do you hear a baseball player say, this is what I dreamed of in the backyard? Like, I've got a collection of those. They're all goosebump material. Now I add in the podcast, and I've got all these successful stories and stories of failure too. And so the second one was, I think to me, the second one's a better book. Maybe it's just because it's newer and fresher for me. Maybe it's because you're a little better the next time around. But it was also, I dove a little bit deeper into these stories. I tried to make it a little bit more personal and a little bit more about myself, which I don't like to do, but I've had good advice of saying you got to be vulnerable. And I think that this one is more a book about grit and resilience and adversity, and it's not a how to make your dreams come true. It's really just the spirit of dreams change, paths change, adversity happens, and it doesn't always turn out the way we expect it to. And I just like I feel like I had a stronger voice in this one, and I just think it's relatable. I think everybody can relate to this.
Awesome.
I like it. I know you got a lot going on, and I know you got a podcast back to back here. So I know we covered a lot, and we could talk for hours.
Yeah,
So,
but I love this style too. I mean, I just
Yeah.
like it's a conversation.
yeah, and that's early days of podcasting that we used to have like questions, and we'd go through that, and it was a disaster. And then we'd blow through all of our questions.
Yeah.
We had a TV with wheels.
This is so much better. This is so much more my style.
Yeah, this is like after we progressed on and we got to this style, it's like
This is exactly the way a podcast should be, in my opinion.
yeah.
How many episodes did that take us? Like 50?
Probably to
50
ditch the
to
TV.
realize that
Yeah.
that's not the way.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
what we
but
should be doing.
You find your voice, and by the way, I mean it's different for everyone too.
Yeah.
There's never a one size fits all. You got to be true to who you are and what works, and you know you figure that out, right? And the audience will tell you too.
Yeah, we just had to listen to people that were giving us feedback, and we had that they're like, hey, the first 30 minutes of the podcast is pretty boring, but you guys start just like freestyling, just chit chatting the second 30, and that part's way better.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, what if we just ditch the questions? And like when we first thought about that, that was mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
there's no safety net, right?
Yeah. But it's everyone's story goes a different direction. Like to say two stories are ever the same, they're not.
Yeah.
So
No, it's good. It's just a conversation. That's the way it should be, right?
yeah. In the link below and everything, we'll put links to your podcast, links to your books, your social platforms, everything.
Pride Cleaners commercials
Yeah.
or spots
Yeah.
on social, right?
Yeah. Shout out Pride Cleaners. But no, really enjoyed having you on. I
Thank you.
think
Thank you.
a lot of great things.
Appreciate
Love
it.
having you here in KC. And
Before we go, give us a prediction for the season for the Royals.
I'm never good with predicting wins and numbers because how could you possibly know that? But I think anything short of better than last year will be disappointing to them and hopefully to fan base too. I feel like for most of us last year it was all icing on the cake.
Yeah.
We didn't expect them to be that good so soon,
Sure.
and now it's like they were pissed off. They were pissed off that they lost to the Yankees. They were pissed off that it ended the way they did, and they didn't play as well as they felt like they were capable of. So it left a bad taste in their mouth. I like that. But I think now that'll be the expectation around town that anything short of the playoffs will be an extreme disappointment, and anything short of going further than they did last year will be disappointing. So I think that's the expectation. I don't know if that means 86 wins, 89 wins, 90 wins. If they stay healthy, they can do a lot. If they don't, then I think they've got some other pieces in place. But it should be a good year.
Love it.
heard it here first. That's the M3 Podcast. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the M3 Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Want to learn more? Check us out on Instagram at Moss Marketing Group, on Facebook at Moss Marketing 58, or on our website at mossmarketinggroup.com.